Hi, I'm Daisy,
Hi, I'm David.
and we're the MSA Crusaders. Welcome, listeners, to MSA Crusaders, our first podcast, MSA Uncovered.
Our podcast, Daisy and myself, David, is dedicated to those who have or have had and the caregivers of multiple system atrophy, otherwise known as MSA. A few things we want to talk about. First, we created a podcast together to bring awareness, excitement, and educational value to a very, very rare and uh, unfortunate disease of multiple system atrophy. So, in our first podcast, we're going to talk about quite a few things. And number one, we're going to talk about ourselves. So, Daisy, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about yourself and your connection to MSA?
Sure, I'll be happy to, David. I am 50 years old. I'm from Texas, East Texas. I used to work in renting condos on the beach, but now I'm an author, published 2 books, and I donate proceeds to the charity for MSA. And I have 3 grown children, and I am a patient of MSA.
Excellent. Myself, I'm 43. I live in very northwest Indiana, Griffith, Indiana, pretty close to Gary in Chicago. I still work in the telecommunications industry. I'm a technical manager. I train people on technical fields. I've been married for 21 years. I have 2 daughters, 18 and 12 years old. Um, well, I may not be a publisher. Publisher in fourth grade. I don't think that counts. That was a freebie. Um, I do have my own up and coming YouTube channel that I like to think is moving, dedicated to multiple system atrophy and my journey and our journey and other people's journeys. Uh, to leave a legacy behind for people to view and see and take note of. I also, like Daisy, am a patient of MSA. So, Daisy, would you like to tell us the characteristics or what is MSA for the average person out there who's like MSA? Like, what is multiple system atrophy? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, it is a progressive neurological disorder that is characterized by a combination of symptoms. The first affect the central nervous system, which controls how a person moves, everything your brain does for you that you don't have to think about, like your autonomic nervous system, your involuntary functions like blood pressure, digestion. And there's currently, as you said before, no cure for MSA and no way of slowing down the progress. People with this condition typically live for 6 to 9 years. After their symptoms start, it may get worse quickly during this time. Some people live for more than 10 years after being diagnosed. There's no known cause for multiple system atrophy. It's not MS, but Parkinson's with autonomic failure.
If we had one disease or condition to compare it to, we would everybody in the medical field would say it's pretty comparable to Parkinson's. The two differences between multiple system atrophy and Parkinson's, which they're cousins diseases. Parkinson's never affects your autonomic, the part of your body that's autonomic. In the Parkinson's, you live much longer with these things. You obviously the lifespans are different. Parkinson's is generally 20, 30 years. You can knock Parkinson's down with a lot of medicines, but multiple system atrophy, very short lives. The average onset age, the age onset is 57, 58 years old. So, those that get MSA at that age, they're getting older too, which complicates issues. But MSA patients normally live, I think in the United States, they said that it's generally 5 to 7 years in general. It varies by country and which sure we live in. But living over 10 years is a dream for a lot of us, seeing how quickly these things happen. So I think that's the big distinction. If we can compare it to something, it would be like Parkinson's, except it's messing with your organs and causing organ failure for sure. And it's neurodegenerative, right? Like you said, Daisy, the brain starts to fall apart. Parts of the brain stop working, and as we'll talk about in other episodes, in conjunction with the spinal cord and the central nervous system, they stops communicating signals, which is why part of our organs fail, and our nerves, the involuntary movements for sure, right?
Yeah.
Very very well. Uh, Anything to add on that?
Um,
Well, and I'll ask you because there's two main types of MSA. There's two main types, right? I mean, there's technically three. Let's not confuse people on the first visit, the first podcast. Uh, there's a third one that's just incorporated into the common two, and otherwise known as MSAP and MSAC. So P is for Parkinsonisms, behaviors like Parkinson's, and the C is for cerebellar. Cerebellar is really important for, like, when you drink too much liquor, it affects your cerebellar. It's the cerebellar toxin, makes you walk drunk and talk for drunk, stuff like that, right?
yeah, and they merge, and you do end up with both of them.
I'm glad you said that. Mine actually started off, which we'll talk in a second. Mine started off as more P, more Parkinson's, and now it's morphing into the C version, which is very rare. I was like, oh, well, at least I won't have to worry about the C, but now here comes the C version. There we
Mine
go,
too.
right?
Mine
So,
too.
so you see, there's different symptoms of each of those. Did you want to expand upon on a few of those?
So P is slowness of movement. You have muscle rigidity, posture instability, tremors, difficulty with coordination and balance. In C, your cerebellar is poor coordination and balance, jerky or unsteady movements, an abnormal gait, characterized by a wide-based shuffling walk, speech abnormalities, as slurred speech or dysarthria, is that how you say that?
It's R3. Yeah. That's a tongue twister. Absolutely.
And difficulty with fine motor skills such as writing or buttoning clothes. And I have all of the above.
Every one of them.
Every one of them.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at a list here, and I would say I absolutely have all of those too under MSAP and MSAC. And then to make things worse, Daisy, we get worse. We get autonomic symptoms, and then
Yeah,
some other ones. So tell us about those other ones.
those are
Hmm.
orthostatic hypertension, though. Urinary problems, sexual dysfunction, constipation, and sweating abnormalities.
Right, right,
All the
and
above again.
all of them. I don't think I have. My sweating is off and on. Constipation, I'm glad I don't have that yet. I have the opposite, believe it or not. That's which can happen. The top three, yeah, absolutely. And then what are these other issues that are part of the autonomic that the brain controls that we might have?
Sleep disturbances, speech and swallowing difficulties, respiratory problems, and cognitive psychiatric changes. Now, I had my speech therapist here today. We did a swallow study not too long ago, and there were some little irregularities with that. So we talked about how to strengthen the tongue muscles to help you with your swallowing. So that's what we're working on now. As far as the urinary problems, I have a subpubic catheter. Now, some people may not know what that is, but it's surgically implanted catheter directly into your abdomen.
Is it painful?
It was,
Is it
especially when I had to have it redone.
right? And we'll talk about that too. That's part of one of the other segments where the issues, the problems we have with having MSA, right? So a couple other features, and then we'll get into more personal uh, criteria here. So MSA is rare. It is it's very rare. It is from my research, my googling and everything in between. They tell us it's the second rarest neurodegenerative disease of them all. Now, I'm not going to say it's the second rarest disease. That would be false. But of all the family of neurodegenerative diseases, it is the second rarest. And how rare? Well, up to 15,000 people in America, United States of America, get this every year. So worldwide, that number is 300,000. I was told of it's so rare. They tell you will never meet somebody in person with MSA. Now, obviously, if you're looking at social media and you actually are trying to find somebody, you'll meet them in person. Probably like Daisy and I will be doing pretty soon. But if you're not, unknowingly, you would never meet somebody with MSA in your lifespan. But pretty interesting. And then Daisy talked about earlier about the differences between MSAP and MSAC. You know, MSAP, Parkinsonism version is mainly in the Western Hemisphere. So North America, South America, and Western Europe. And MSAC is mainly in Asia, Africa, subcontinent, Australia, things like that. So why are they differently in different hemispheres like that? That's a great conversation to have. But it is amazing that most MSAP people that are shaking tremors and things are in the Western Hemisphere, and those that are walking drunk, talking drunk, or the C version is over in Asia. Things like that. So now there are differences. We'll get into personal stories. And I just want to say the stages. So as we speak about our personal stories, which Daisy will lead us in a second, there are different stages for MSA. The problem with MSA is that it's never the same for everybody. My stages, my progression is not the same as Daisy's, and Daisy's is not the same as mine. It might be close, but they're very different. So in general, in the first 3 years of having this, you'll have everything from sexual dysfunction to urinary issues, sleeping disorders, blood pressure issues, walking issues, Parkinsonism, shaking, tremor issues, drunken issues, autonomic failure, and pyramidal signs. So a bunch of things happen in 3 years, typically for most people. And then the next 3 years, 3 to 6 years, depending how long we live for, everything hits the fan. And, that's falling, getting hurt. Daisy spoke about catheter insertion, things like that. The brain starts to fall apart with frontal lobe and executive function dysfunction, right? Not being able to speak anymore, gastrointestinal, GI issues of swallowing and bowel movements, things like that. Tracheotomies, right? Not being able to breathe by yourself, pneumonias, fevers, and there's even a version of this we'll talk later, another podcast about sudden death. Before we get into personal stories, I'll just say, how it progresses with people really depends. If it starts in your autonomic issues, your organs, we have a much shorter lifespan because our organs control our body. But if it starts in the tremors and cerebellar, we'll typically live longer. It's one of those stories we'll start to learn about. Tell us, we want to know, people listening. Weird disease, rare, fatal, bad, it gets ugly. But how did you, Daisy, get to MSA? Like how did you know to go to a doctor? Like, what was your first signs? And, what were the steps after that? Like, tell us a, simplified story. I'm sure we could talk forever, but a more simplified story about, how it started and how did we get to where we are now?
I had some really bad uncoordinated issues where I had the really bad tremors as well, and we would be in the waiting room to see a regular neurologist. My husband would say, "You shaking more than a 90-year-old woman. What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "I don't know. I can't stop. You just need to do it." And the first neurologist he diagnosed me with Parkinson's. And I was doing diagnosed as Parkinson's for a couple of years. They tried different medications. That didn't work. It just made me sick. And then I got sent to a movement disorder specialist. That's the one you have to go to in order to get diagnosed correctly.
Why is that?
He just looked at me 5 minutes and he said, "You have MSA."
Mm.
I said, "What is that? Can you fix me?" He said, "No, I'm sorry, but there's no cure for MSA." And so then I started doing research.
Wow. So your symptoms started with shaking.
Yes, shaking and tripping over my feet
Okay. Yes, that's interesting. Now how long have you had symptoms for?
since the end of 2018, so probably about November of 2018, almost 5 years.
5 years. Wow.
I'm getting up there to that window.
Are you able to move, walk around freely?
No,
So you
I
need
use
assistance,
assistance. Either my husband helps me, I use a walker, or I'm in a wheelchair most of the time.
but you have a dedicated caregiver.
I do 100%. He had to quit his job and take care of me.
Does he always show up on time and do his job?
Yeah. And then I have two caretakers that work part-time to give him a
Okay.
break during the week.
Uh,
What about
that's
you, David?
that's nice. So I've had mine is simple. So mine was started 2.5 years ago. Maybe before that, if we tie in some other symptoms, but 2.5 years ago, I noticed my legs weren't moving properly. They were a step behind, a split second. And it started on both feet, both legs at the same time. I went to a doctor. I ignored that for about a 3/4 of a year. Then my hands got the same way. They started feeling swollen, stiff, rigid. I couldn't move them like I normally would in both hands again, not one sided, but both of them. I go to a doctor. They send me to a rheumatoid arthritis doctor. They said, well, maybe you have RA, and I test negative for it, but they gave me medicine because you never know. Um, so I take all these medicines, and come to find out that's not it. I go to neurologists; they have no idea, and they said because of the onset, it can't be something normal. It can't be RA. So they send me to a movement neurologist for disorders. And like you said, in an instant, after 20 minutes of talking, she first thing she said was MSA, and she says she knows because of the onset and how it started, which is really key because Parkinson's always starts in one side of the body, always. And MSA always starts in both sides of the body. Whatever the feature is, it's always bilateral. So she knew what to look for, and I was thankful. I've had it for 2.5 years, maybe up to 5. If I count some other symptoms that I don't want to, but definitely 2.5, 2 3/4 years, and I'm still working, still pretty my old self. I don't do the things I used to, sports, and I don't go to the gym too much and run and basketball. But I'm still working mainly from home, and I can still do things, but it's incredibly hard, which obviously we'll talk about a lot more. How do you feel, right? So, what are the emotional impacts on not only yourself but caregivers and family as far as having something like this with MSA?
I always feel like such a burden. It's very hard to lose your independence. Very depressing.
Yeah, because you probably have to rely on other people for everything almost, I imagine, right?
Yeah, almost everything.
Almost. I'll say that's one thing I'm getting used to. My wife has to drive more and more, and they help button shirts and things like that. I haven't progressed. I haven't had it that long, but it's interesting having to rely on other people for simple things. Wash your back and cut some steak from time to time, cut some food on your plate, things like that. It is depressing having to rely on other people for things that you definitely done before, right?
Yeah,
Especially somebody like myself, sports and athletic, and just it's not normal for especially for a man and a husband. Like, hey, can you help me? It goes against what a lot of men and husbands believe, macho and stuff like that. But it's love. It happens, and that's what wives and husbands and families for. They're there to help you through thick and thin. I
really
will. Oh yeah,
hurts your pride.
yeah. Amen. It sure does. Um, so we talked about. We'll take about another 5 minutes here, but we talked about symptoms you have. So you mentioned a whole bunch of symptoms we in general about the MSA, but if you could say maybe the most severe symptoms that you have um, because of MSA, what would those be?
Right now, that would be my bladder constipation.
right? So it affects autonomic and bladder. Like what you're saying is you can't control bladder, bowel and bladder movements, probably, right?
Right. The bladder started out as urgency, and then it started to retention, and then I just couldn't go without being cath. So I went with the Catholic catheter
Hmm.
because it's less UTIs.
There you go. Yeah, we'll talk about that too some other time. But I had a UTI, a kidney infection. They thought it was UTI kidney. It about killed me, right? Yeah, I have the urgency and incontinence too. I'm still able to control it for the most part. I'm not gonna lie about that. I'd say my biggest issues would be my slurring of speech that's gone down a lot. My walking is absolutely horrible. Um, and the balance issues. My muscles are the tightest things I've ever had on this earth. So you know, we all have cognitive issues that progress with this too. So it is pretty interesting how everybody has different issues with it. I tell you, I do be punching in my sleep though. My sleep just my wife has learned to go to
Poor
the other side of
wife.
the bed. Yeah, I got some videos to show you where when I start speaking in my sleep, she goes to the other side because after I speak in my sleep, I start punching and kicking and
Uh-oh.
running. Yeah, that's a weird sensation having to do that.
Yeah, I forgot about that. One of the my first symptoms was like Charlie horses in my neck.
Hmm.
Very,
Yeah.
very painful.
Yeah, postural instability, I think they call it stuff like that.
And
Um,
then I would punch my husband too.
you probably deserve to die, I imagine. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
just like my wife. No, just kidding, just kidding. Um, so there's different types of care we have, right? What type of care do you get on a regular basis?
I have an occupational therapist that comes to my home. I have nurses that come to my home because I'm on palliative care, as well as physical therapy. And then I go out of the house for aquatic therapy, which is the very best therapy you can get for MSA.
Excellent. Yeah, better to be in the pool than be with gravity, right?
Yeah, and I only have to go to my movement disorder specialist once every 3 months
Oh, that's good.
for Botox injections for the Charlie horses.
That's a good topic for another one. I've heard about that. I got PT, I got physical therapy and occupational. I don't do anything else. It's not needed right now for me. I imagine my voice will be pretty coming pretty soon too, but that's not here or there yet.
I have speech
Um,
therapy too. I forgot about that.
you can speech one.
Yeah, speech.
Hmm. That's a very involved therapy. I've heard of that one. So Daisy, there's a few things as far as initiatives and campaigns that are going on about MSA. What are these things? Tell me about them.
Well, for one, there are clinical trials,
Hmm.
and then you can always go to websites for more information, like defeatmsa.org for one.
Defeatmsa.org. What info do they have on the defeatmsa.org?
They have the worldwide websites where you can find information about progression, percentages, anything you want to know about MSA.
Yeah, that's really what it is. So the way I see it is defeatmsa.org is like they're a part of a group of organizations and websites with very similar names to support MSA across the globe, not only the United States of America. And then clinical trials, right? There are many, since there's no medicine to cure us or stop it or slow it down, the clinical trials they're all across the country, all across the world for that matter.
And they
Um,
list them there.
Yeah, they list them on msa.org, also the clinicaltrials.gov, the direct website. Um, and there's different ways of trying to defeat MSA. So kind of goes hand in hand with the website, that's for sure. Also, you know, nothing like getting involved for your cause, whether it's your children at school or basketball, your local church or things, but also, for those of us that have MSA and the caregivers, right? There's a lot of things that we can do, right? I mean, one of those things is, like we just said, going to like defeatmsa.org, an organization dedicated only to MSA, and even giving donations of any type to the website, goes completely to the. It's a nonprofit, I know that for sure. So 100% of the proceeds actually go to MSA research and development, things like that. But there are some other things that are out there, and I know you said earlier you're an author. You wrote how many books was that?
too, and both of them I give some of my proceeds to the MSA.org charity. So that helps too. If you buy my books, you also help charity.
Excellent. So where do we go and what are the titles of these fabulous publications?
I have Unexpected Moments, which is the first one, and then Beyond Heaven's Gates, which starts out as short stories and ends with Living with MSA Continues. So
Excellent. Excellent. And that's on Amazon.
Amazon.
And don't you have a direct website too for those or no?
No, I don't, but you can go to my Daisy page on Facebook and you can get some signed author copies if you want.
Ooh. And I think those were shippings included.
Shipping and taxes included.
Can't find that type of deal anywhere, that's for sure.
No.
And there's other things that we can everybody can do, whether it's attending special medical conferences, for Parkinson's, MSA, things of the neurodegenerative disease category. There are active fundraisers year round, and on top of activities outside like walking for MSA, and it really depends where they're at. Sometimes California, New York, Chicago, Texas, they're everywhere. They do post those on the defeatmsa.org website. I've seen those over there too. And then there's even local support groups. Now, I don't know, MSA does not have a support group, like a local support group that I know of, because it's so rare. It's so uncommon. I actually go to my local one in Highland, Indiana. One of my doctors referred me there. It's kind of surprising. They knew that there's no cure for it. There's no support group. And my neurologist said, go to Northwest Indiana Parkinson's Group. I think it's .com or .net. But if you Google Northwest Indiana Parkinson's, it's straight for Parkinson's. And when I go there, it's mostly Parkinson's, but there's some people there with essential tremor, which is a lot of shaking, supranuclear palsy, and I'm like the only person there with MSA, like they never heard of it. But it's the same family. A lot of these groups, a lot of these diseases in the neurodegenerative are the same category, same family type. So going to a Parkinson's group is definitely better than nothing. That's for sure. And I can tell you, I've had nothing but the best experiences, kindest of souls over there, including the medical and the persons themselves. So, definitely reach out for local. And I know on defeatmsa.org, they have a list of brochures and documents and flyers, and even a list of local support groups for MSA.
You can also find really good support groups on Facebook. There's
Facebook
chats and stuff you can go into with other MSA patients.
That's true. I'm glad you said that. I like you probably before. You're much more into the social media, having this longer than I did for sure. I was surprised how many actual pretty large groups there are for MSA. Just not people that think they have MSA, but those that have it, and the caregivers and family themselves. And it's a great resource to ask questions and to reach out and see what's going on in cities and states and things like that. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I completely missed that one for sure.
With there being so many, a limit to people having them, there's what worldwide people can come together.
Oh, absolutely.
And support each other.
For sure, for sure. So, right, we like to keep the first podcast short and sweet. I think we did a good job. Daisy, I think you'd agree. Definitely want to ask for any submissions and questions. We get people all the time on our our separate social media accounts. My YouTube, Daisy's Facebook, always asking questions and comments, concerns, and things. So, definitely reach out to us via our Facebook page or our separate links. We definitely would like to entertain questions and answer any comments and concerns that you might have. Engagement is everything when it comes to defeating this disease. The more attention we can get, the more focus we can get on it. So we may not have an ice bucket challenge for ALS, for Lou Gehrig's disease, but there's definitely something coming that we got to try to get that type of notoriety like they did for that type of funding and attention. Donations really took off in the ice bucket challenge for ALS. They made more money in a year than they did in the first 20 years just because of the ice bucket challenge for donations, right? For research. And that's something we got to entertain too, which is why I would think Daisy and myself were starting a podcast like this, because we're capable still. We're able to, we want to, we have the time, and we understand the importance of speaking about MSA, multiple system atrophy, because it's such a short-lived disease,
Absolutely.
and so rare, right? I mean, if we don't do it,
So rare.
who's going to do it?
That's right.
That's one of those things, though, right? That most people that get MSA are upper 50s or 60s, and they're already having issues with speaking. They're not able to compensate. And, we're pretty young for this, so.
There is young onset MSA, and that's I believe we fall in that category.
Yeah, they get it very early. I thought I was early at 41, but 43 to be diagnosed. But there's people in their 30s and late 20s, I think.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, young onset. Also, young onset Parkinson's as well. Things can happen quick. Daisy, what do we have lined up going forward? What can you tell our fabulous listeners?
Well, if you'll watch our upcoming episode or listen to our upcoming episode next week, we're going to start talking with caregivers or caretakers. I don't know, no, caregivers. And I'd like to say that they are MSA Crusaders as well, because they live through this with us. They sacrifice a lot to help us out.
Absolutely. I would just add, absolutely. We're all in this together, because MSA, they don't know how it starts. Can't defeat it, not yet. And doctors and researchers have no idea how. We know what's causing. We know the mechanism, misfolding protein, but we don't know how it starts. So, we might have had to worry about diabetes running in our genes, or maybe even cancer running in the genes, or things like that. Well, MSA, we don't know if it runs in people's genes, or is it completely random and sporadic. So that's why we're all in this together, because there's no pattern to how people contract this MSA. So absolutely,
Takes a village.
Takes a village. I will leave it at that. That's absolutely the truth. So closing here, I definitely want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank Daisy. Daisy has been a phenomenal help and resource of Daisy wanted to create a podcast. I normally would say no to things like involving people. I'm really to myself, but Daisy is very passionate about it, and if she's passionate, I'm passionate. So why not come together and create a podcast that will help others for some time to come, right? In the foreseeable future.
Well, everything happens for a reason, and I think it was a reason that I found you online and reached out to you. I don't do that either, so this was definitely unique for us.
Yeah, I'm a very antisocial person, but you know what? MSA is definitely changing things. So it's a pleasure. The first episode for MSA covered, and if anyone wants to get a hold of our podcast, it will be on Podbean. We'll put the link in the description. It's under MSA Crusaders, I believe. Daisy, we have a Facebook page just started under MSA Crusaders as well. If they looked at, I'll put that link into the description as well. I'll be posting things on YouTube. I'm pretty sure you'll be posting things as well. So, if anyone's interested, reach out. But we definitely have all the links and descriptions in the description section of this podcast.
And don't hesitate to email us either. You can do that too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's
MSAcrusaders@gmail.com.
There you go. MSAcrusaders@gmail.com. Pretty easy. So, Daisy, I'll let you have the last word. You take us out. Anything else you want to say?
I want to thank y'all so much for listening to us and giving us a chance and time to speak with you, and reach out to us and give us any suggestions for any episodes coming up. And we look forward to speaking with Allison Latimer and about her husband next week.
Sounds good. We thank you again. And till next episode. See you later.